Hi, everyone. This is Roni from Port. Today in our Getting Started with Port session, which will take you through what you need to set up Port. We'll have Aidan O'Connor, who's our Senior Solutions Engineer. Since I see some people still joining the call, we'll be starting in about 2 minutes. So we're muting for now and we'll begin in 2 minutes. Okay, so welcome everyone to Getting Started with Sport. As I've said earlier, we're having Aidan O'Connor run our demo and Getting Started session today. Feel free to ask any questions in the Q&A at the bottom. We'll make sure to answer the questions. We will also be recording the session, so you can receive it later on if you want to review some parts of it. Feel free to ask questions at any time. And with that, I'm giving the entire stage to you, Aidan.
All right, thanks, Ronnie. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We'll be doing, we do these sessions every once in a while, just getting started with Port. I've picked a topic today that, I've been in Port for a month and a half now, so I just, something that I wanted to share with you all. It's relating blueprints 101. We're going to do a really simple use case, but I think what I show you here today, you can take and go apply it to some other things with the concepts I'll show. First, I'm going to do a brief overview of Port, just in case anybody is brand new to Port, hasn't heard of it, or doesn't know much. So the way we're coming at this is that we believe the developer experience is broken. It's very difficult for managers to achieve quality and security at scale. A lot of that might be that a lot of things are ticket driven. I need to go put in a ticket for a new GCP project, or maybe even worse, like a new service. That really slows development. So developers get frustrated with that. Documentation might be stale. So what we hear a lot, especially from really large customers, is that if you have microservices, if you have a monolith, that information might be manually recorded somewhere in a spreadsheet. If you want to know about a service that you don't usually work with, you can go and do a search in GitHub or whatever Git provider you use. And that can make it really difficult to go work on something that you don't usually work on. You might spend a lot more time tracking down kind of a how-to guide that might be old and not updated, rather than actually working with it. Manual readiness checklists. We talked to some large customers that maybe once a quarter, they'll put out a data call where you can fill some things in. Not very much automation there, difficult to drive initiatives to improve software quality. CSVs for expense reporting, for GitHub workflows or GitHub pipelines actions, or cloud costs is another big one. Manually done via CSVs, hard to connect, hard to see what does my domain or service or team cost me to produce what they're producing. and then using Slack to get developers to align with standards. So all very difficult things for the developer experience that we aim to fix. So what we want Port to be is what you need it to be for whatever persona you are. So if you're a developer, being able to go do very easy self-service actions yourself, globally search all of your services, be able to find out information about, is there a service that I've been asked to create already? If there is one, how do I use it? If I'm application security, connecting vulnerabilities, misconfigurations with running instances to kind of slice down a lot of that application security information you get. SREs determining what's going on, what's wrong with a cluster or workload. CISO kind of getting an overall view of security from a whole holistic perspective. And then VP of engineering is a really big one. How do I drive initiatives to improve software quality? So you do that through the IDP port, and you use all the platforms you've already invested in that just need a little bit more correlation between all of them to get the results you need. So that correlation, that's what we'll be talking about today, relating blueprints. So just to kind of get your mind turning on what you might use Port for. We don't aim to improve developer experience. We aim to kind of redefine developer experience. So whether it's planning your day, what do I have to work on today? Today they might have to go into GitHub, Jira, a number of things, Slack, Trello if they use that. Bring it all into one place. During development, all of these things that go into it, stopping them from having to context switch and getting them back on the golden path. Shipping features, operating production, all these things we aim to redefine the developer experience to make it fundamentally better and different. So to get to relating blueprints into Port, I'm just going to cover one thing here. So when you want to ingest data into Port's catalog, you're going to start with a blueprint. So a blueprint is kind of the catch-all is whatever you need it to be. So whatever you would like to represent from your data model. So traditionally that might be a repository, a running workload from Kubernetes, the pull requests that are related to the repository, anything you need it to be. I was talking to somebody the other day that wanted to say cloud architecture is this, and there are all of these components that feed into it. You can depict that in Port. So once you create your blueprint that has all these properties that are configurable, and you can bring in different information from API integrations or our open source framework called Ocean, then you send data in, right? So you've put in place the repository that holds all this data. You send data into the blueprints, and then finally you're going to map the data. So all of our data sources have ways that you can feed data into different things. So a single GitHub response from that data source might go into different places. So I'm going to show you a little bit more how to do that today with a really simple use case. So relation mapping. I'm going to stop sharing here, and please, again, add any questions in the chat. I'm going to bring up a personal environment here. So in my builder, which represents, again, my data model, and yours could look much simpler, much more complex, whatever you need it to be. I want to do one simple thing, and I've already done it, but I can describe how I did it here. My service, which is a repository in GitHub, needs to be connected to the running workload. And why do you need to do that? Maybe you'd like to see the health of the service and maybe a different version of a release. You want to connect these things together. This is the way you would do it. And there's a little bit of configuration we're going to do, which I'll show you how to do. So start with the service. What you're going to want is a few relations. So again, we have our blueprint, and then we want to relate it to another blueprint. So we'll take production runtime. So the service is production runtime. I've taken that service, I've put it through a build pipeline, I've put it into the production environment. obviously before that staging QA and way before that development. And then we're going to connect it to the running workload. So start with that. The way you create a new relation, you could do it either in JSON mode up here. This is also a great way to copy and paste different but similar blueprints. So you'll add a new relation. For this example, we'll say staging runtime. You're going to choose the target blueprint. We'll say for this workload limit. It's kind of up to you. Right now, I'll do one entity. So we'll have one service that goes to one staging running workload. And then required, we'll leave that as false for now. So we can create that. I'm going to focus on production runtime just for time purposes. So now that's connected to this. And then once we go into the data sources, again, you have a few options for bringing data into port. We have some native integrations. So we have GitHub app, for example, API, webhook, and then we have this great Ocean extensibility framework where you can bring data in that way. So in the GitHub exporter, we're going to use a little bit of JQ to add something here. So what we're doing is we get the repository information from GitHub. And the name of the repository is the thing that we're going to focus on here. So the name, and then the JQ we're going to apply, we're going to say, take the name, split it based on the word production, dash production. Then we're going to take the first instance of that. Now, it might be a little difficult to see how I got here. Your best friend when you're using port, something called jqplay.org. So we can take some JSON. So we'll say the name of the running workload would be juice shop production. And what I'm adding here it's got to be in quotes in the curly brackets. I guess we can just take juice shop production, skip the name. So obviously JQ dot name would be that first key for the name in the JSON response. But we'll say split at dash production. So that splits it into two pieces. So you've got juice shop, and it breaks off production, and then we'll take the first item from that, and we've got juice shop. So this is the way we go from the name of the running workload, juice shop production, and we take a piece of that and find the related repository. So use JQplay to do this kind of operation. So within the data source mapping, we're splitting off that dash production so that we can find the right repository. I'm going to do a resync of the GitHub app. It's just going to refresh the data. And then within my catalog, services, we'll find the repository I'm looking for. So juice shop, again, developers are going to want to know more about where is this actually deployed? What is the health of that deployment? Do we need to do something with the repository to fix the running workload? You can see it down here. So it's related also to juice shop. You've got pull request that's already been configured. I don't think this one will have, yeah, so it points you right to the juice shop running workload. This helps developers, we've seen, by wanting to know more about their services. So obviously they're used to working on the code. They might do a request to bring it to production staging Q&A environment or QA environment, and then going to see more about it through some related entities. So for more visual learners, you could take the graph view. So I see that my juice shop service is this central component. We've got some pull requests that feed into this, and we've got workloads where it's deployed. Um, so going back 101, you've got two blueprints here, one for service, one for workload. These are being fed by two different data sources. This is being fed by the GitHub app, and then this is being fed through my Kubernetes integration. We relate them. So staging, runtime, production runtime. We go into the data sources. We map that data accordingly. We say, I want to take the name of the workload, split off dash production, and then find the right repository, resync the data, and then we're able to connect that repository to the right running workload. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat. Is there anything else I can cover for anyone? Anything? Maybe someone just got started with Port, and you have any questions? I know one that comes up fairly often is developer self-service. I can get into that. So we have some time left. So developer self-service, going back, can pull up the slides again in a minute, but going back to some of those developer daily routines, standing up a new service, a new repository, everything that goes into it, making sure it has the right pipelines, et cetera, can be difficult. We've talked to people that you might put in a ticket. Once you get the request to create this new service, it goes to an operations team, DevOps team. It goes and creates the repository, make sure that everything correct is in it, and then they hand it back to you as the owner of the repository. We make this a lot easier by allowing developers to go and click a few buttons, provide some basic information, and create a new service. So the example I use here, we go to create new service. All you have to do is provide it a name. So we'll call this the authentication service. And as you can see, I've added some regex checking in there to say, hey, it has to end in -service with a capital S. Helps our team to understand what's out there. And then we click execute. You can view the details in the action, but it'll appear in my catalog then. And then other developers who want to go look for authentication service can go and search using our global search for it. Let me take a second. How do I connect the backend for developer self-service? That's a good question. Thank you. So the backend, there's a couple components, and I'll open up, how we edit this. So basic details you're providing to the developer about what this does for them. Some inputs that they can add there. So service name is one that I've chosen as kind of an easy example. You have your option for other inputs. One might be entity selection, so that wouldn't really be applicable in scaffolding new service, but maybe for modifying existing cloud resource, that's a good one. So have the user select an existing, let's say S3 bucket, that's always an easy one, and change it from being private to being public. So having them select from a list of given existing S3 buckets, and then giving them just one parameter. Do you want it to be public or private? Execute the action. It can go and be set up however you'd like it. So create a new pull request that takes that existing resource, the Terraform that backs it, creates a new PR, and then someone can merge it, or you can just go directly into the deployment pipeline. But to the original question, the back end. So you have a couple options here. You can do several different pipelines here. So Jenkins pipeline, GitLab, Azure, GitHub. And what that's going to do is find which organization the pipeline is in, let it know let port know which repository holds this pipeline. What we typically recommend is having a repository that controls these port actions. And over time, you can make it like a GitOps repository for how you actually control port. So you can versionize port and deploy different versions. Give it the workflow file name, and then port will trigger that CI pipeline. Webhooks, I've seen this very useful for GitLab, so we can take advantage of the pipeline trigger token that GitLab offers, where you might have a pipeline out there. You provide port the name of the project ID and the GitLab trigger token, and then port goes and triggers that pipeline. So that's the back end. It's obviously with any CI pipeline, very configurable. So the way I've seen it done for scaffolding a new service, for example, if you don't have like a basic service template that you currently use, you can use like something called Cookie Cutter. It's got a bunch of example services, service scaffolds. So that might include like a basic CI pipeline that you can then, fork and modify. Some basic testing files along with like if you're doing a Python application like a Flask app basic. And then finally the permissions. So let me skip this. Add some basic information here so we could see. And then the permissions, you can give access to everyone in the organization. I've seen some people want to split the experience. So if you have developers who need to do basic create or delete infrastructure operations, you expose that to them and give them just a very few parameters. And then everything else in the back end is already pre-configured, just waiting on the developer, maybe the name and the size of the resource you want to give to them, and then manual approval. Or you can say, I don't want to give access to everyone. I want to give it to just a certain team, or even just certain users. Manual approval can be notified for, let's say, like a DevOps team for standing up new resources. They can take that notification via Slack, email, etc., webhook even, and then go approve or deny the action. I'm seeing another question here. What happens when you push cost data into port? Do you recommend developers set up their own ephemeral environments? Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that's been coming up a lot. So we can take cost information from a couple different places. So if you have, I don't know if the person who asked the question has like an AWS cost and usage report or uses kube cost, but cost and usage report, very easy to get into port. I've got an example. Nope. Go back here. Give me a second. In the builder, I have AWS cost. So everything that can be ingested from AWS cost and usage report. So obviously, for those who are experienced with it, there's an S3 bucket that'll hold the daily costs. So port sets something up to ingest that data into port, and then you can connect it. So obviously, the cost and usage report, I've seen these. There's a lot of information. It's not necessarily connected to the service, the team, the domain. So then you can make those relations. I've done a very simple one here. I've connected it to a few of the cloud resources. You can also connect it to domain. But within the catalog, probably the most helpful thing for to answer this question would be a cloud cost dashboard. So say AWS costs. This would just be from the cost and usage report. I've got some team information here, but a cost deep dive, or we saw an article about having like a monthly spend meeting. And that's not just cloud cost; it could be any SaaS cost. but having this be the basis for FinOps and development to talk about these things productively. So here's how much, this one team is costing us. Here's how many resources they have. This is not quite enough information. So we allow developers or more likely engineering leaders and FinOps to dive deeper. Okay, so what environment are these deployed into? What service is it? And then what resources is it consuming? So you can go from an AWS cost and usage report and then slice that down further to say, okay, this is how much all of these things cost. We're going to connect that to a team or a domain or a service, and we can make better decisions. So for like ephemeral environment creation, you could use like a cost estimating tool. So before anything is deployed, here's how much this environment may cost you. Where you might find that useful is in a self-service action. So if I had one that was like create a new development environment, should be ephemeral. You can put in a time to live for that. So I need this for 3 days. It's going to cost me this much. Okay, maybe I just use it for 1 day. Some people use it for different things. So if you have clusters that maybe overuse a shared node pool, maybe you add a dedicated node pool for that cluster. Another question, who uses this, developers or FinOps, or does it depend on the company? So I would say both. So like the monthly cost review meeting. So this caters to, I think, both personas. So FinOps gets the AWS cost and usage report. So a lot of information, identifier title, blended, unblended costs, amortized costs, et cetera. But where we see more effect for this is when developers are able to add their team information. Hey, who owns this resource, so that we know not just a spreadsheet of how much things are costing, but who owns it, what domain is it part of, what service is it a part of, and then have a productive conversation around there. So the question was, who uses developers or FinOps? I think it's a good meeting ground for both. Yeah, so I hope that was helpful. It may depend on the company. You might just have, for very large organizations with hundreds of cloud accounts, subscriptions, projects, et cetera, you might want to look at it from a higher level. So I would add maybe an organization, a division concept, and this for presumably like a smaller engineering organization. Yeah, I think cube cost is another way we can take in this information. So cluster costs, like I was saying, there's a couple use cases for this. Are there clusters that are costing me a little bit too much? Or do I have clusters that maybe need their own dedicated node pools? So it's a good starting point for that FinOps and development conversation. So how many clusters does each team own? A little bit more information about the clusters, maybe some day 2 actions. So shut down a cluster. Hey, we see that maybe there's a development environment one that's cost us a couple thousand that someone forgot about. You don't have to go search for that in AWS. You can just bring that information here, and then go and shut it down. And then again, breaking it down by team, cluster, whatever you'd like to group on, you could do so here. Not seeing any more questions. Okay, have you seen people adding AppSec data? Yeah, I think we have a good dashboard for that in our public demo. And by the way, I'll add this to the chat here. So check that out on your free time. It's free. You don't have to give an email or anything. For application security, a couple ways you could do it. So incidents and issues. So vulnerabilities. You've probably invested in a number of vulnerability misconfiguration tools. those may not bring in all the context needed. So you might have an undeployed application that has several hundred vulnerabilities, and that's not necessarily useful, and they might be critical. So they're kind of drowning out maybe high level vulnerabilities that are not critical, but are actually deployed, are actually public facing. So bringing that information from the tool you've invested in into Port and connecting it to the right team, the right service, the running Kubernetes cluster, cloud resources that they're on, is effective. So take a look at critical. We can see where this CVE is running. So impacted services, these are actually running. So we need to go fix this by merging a PR. And development environments, maybe you don't care as much about that. Ideally, before you get to production, you've taken care of this. But I think the point here is that for application security, it's a good way to correlate your investment in a lot of tools with the development context and production context that you have from other tools.
One last chance to ask Aiden some questions, and if not, we'll close the webinar. And you'll be getting the recording in case you need it. Also, if you're not on our community, do join it. It's a great place to have your answers, your questions answered.
Yeah, I can provide a link to that community if I can find it quickly.
You can actually find it on our site. Under resources, there's a link to the community page and you can sign up there. In any case, I don't see any more questions coming in. So we'll conclude the session and send you the recording as soon as we can. Thank you very much, Aiden. It was a pleasure.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.